In this video, we're going to take a look at the Sailor 1911 Standard. Let's jump straight to the end and start with my thoughts on this pen. I find this pen in its size just a bit smaller than I would prefer in my hand, which is one of the reasons that I will frequently post it when I'm using it. Now, I don't write music, so in that, this nib is largely wasted on me. But when I write with it, it's got enough tipping material that it feels like a very broad, stubbish nib, and not as stubby as you would expect a music nib to be. So with that, it is more useful in writing than, say, your 1.1 or 1.5 stubs. But again, the nib itself and what it actually is wasted on me. I really do prefer the 1911 large in size in my hand. It's a much better fit than this one. That a little bit of difference makes all the difference in your hand. And I don't see going out of my way for this one in its size as much, which is strange because I do realize that I enjoy that Pro Gear Slim, and I don't have a problem with this. Maybe my issue is more I don't enjoy the Sailor music nibs as much as I wish I did, and maybe that feeling is for me taken out a little bit on the pen itself in its size. Now that we know how I feel about the Sailor 1911 Standard, let's see how I got to that opinion, starting with the unboxing. The Sailor 1911 Standard came in a box like this, which contained a box like this. As always, I've mentioned it before, I do appreciate Sailor's minimal look in a box while keeping it classy. So I like what they do, and it makes for a good gift presentation. Presentation matters. With the pen out of the box, we need to get to the nib. Now, as long as it doesn't take 20 turns to uncap a pen, I generally don't care. So, how many turns does it take to uncap this pen? The Sailor 1911 Standard takes 1 3/4 turns to uncap. 1 3/4 turn is a bit more than I would prefer. I can live with it. It's not like it's 2 turns, but I certainly could go with a little less, especially when we get into smaller pens. When they take more turns, it just feels weird, where, I don't know, if it was a much larger pen and took more turns, I might not think too much about it. But it definitely is more noticeable here than on the other Sailors in how many turns it takes. This gets us to the nib. This has a gold music nib. You'll notice, other than the etching difference, the nib is the same as the Tasha one, and that's because Sailor makes the Tasha nibs. Now, they make really good nibs, and this is still a very good nib, and what's lost in what it can really do is because of me completely as a user error, but I really do like the scroll work that they put on their nibs. If you enjoy videos like this, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. Now, let's ink this pen up. The Sailor 1911 Standard is a proprietary cartridge or converter pen, and it holds approximately 0.8 milliliters of ink. The ink for today is Montegrappa Blue Black. It's only worth mentioning because this might be the first Sailor pen review of mine you've watched. I like proprietary converters, and I like the Sailor converters. Despite what people may have said about them on other videos, I've never had an issue with them, and they just keep going. I see them as performing very well, and while people think they hold less ink than others, I found they hold right about the same. As a habit, I don't normally post my pens, but some pens need to be posted to be used comfortably, and some people prefer to post their pens. This pen does post very well. It comes all the way down. The band helps protect the cap. It's a thinner pen, which makes me want to post it, and especially on that section. Now, if I had it unposted, I find it's just long enough that I don't feel I have to post it, but I do tend to post this one like I do the Pro Gear Slim. Now, the important part, the writing sample. While I write with this, I can't help but notice that this nib's a bit drier than would, I think, be needed for this ink to look better. So some of what we see when looking at the writing is because this probably could have used a different ink to show off what it can do. So as I said, it's like having a very broad, stubbish nib, which isn't a problem. I don't mind broad nibs that are a bit stubby. It adds a little bit of character to the writing while you write, which I do enjoy about this. I find it to be pleasant to write with. It gives quite a bit of feedback right where I like it. It is definitely not scratchy. It's definitely not too much feedback. It's not a tiny bit, and you can hear it in the writing during those parts where there's nothing else going on. I think if this was a little bit wetter, we might see some more of the shading in the ink that's really not coming through a tremendous amount here. Largely the pen and ink combination. Now, as I write with it, if I was to uncap it, I would find the end of the pen right in the bend of my thumb and index finger, which I would see as really very uncomfortable. So the thing about this pen that stands out to me is it should be a regular sized pen, but it is certainly smaller than the average pen. And with that little bit smaller that it does create a different feeling in the hand. I think it's worth the extra money to go after the 1911 large or the Pro Gear large over the standard size, at least for me. Now, if you like the standard size 1911, then, you would obviously already know about this pen, so that's a ridiculous statement. What am I thinking? I do think that while I hold it farther back towards the threads, I don't feel the threads in any kind of a way. If I was holding it on the section, I do think the little flare at the section would stop your fingers from reaching the nib. With it being thinner, I do tend to hold it a bit farther back, but I think I hold most of my pens a little farther back. Now for something a bit more standard in comparing writing size. I use Mnemosyne Blue to do this, and here's how it compares to a Jowo Extra Fine on the left, medium in the middle, and a 1.1 stub on the right. Being a music nib and thinking of it as a very broad, stubby nib, you can see that it writes quite wide, kind of like a double broad, and a little under a 1.1 stub, where you would really think of this as falling. So, good, predictable performance. But how does this one compare to other nibs I've used? Looking at the writing of a 1911 standard with a music nib, here it is next to a Tasha Spectrum with a music nib, a Pilot Custom 912 with a music nib, a Sailor 1911 large with a zoom nib, a Platinum 3776 with a music nib, a Pen BBS 456 with a Goulet 1.5 stub, So it isn't a review without some size comparisons. Here it is capped. Here it is uncapped. And here it is posted. I've mentioned before that I find the pen to be a little smaller than is my preference. It doesn't mean that it is a small pen, although looking at the pictures, you can see that it is a little bit smaller than average. Now, this pen's been made for a while, so I don't see them changing, and they do have the larger version. This one does cost quite a bit less, which was why when I was experimenting with nibs, I tried for the standard. At this point, we have a dirty pen that we need to go ahead and clean. Be sure to check out the next pen review where we take a look at the Sailor My First Pen.
Do you want to do your own ink chromatographies but don't want to have to buy chromatography paper? Have I got good news for you. Cut up coffee filters. That's right, and for just $19.95 you can get your very own cut up coffee filter, but just one. But wait, there's more. If you order now at just $19.95, I'm going to throw in a second cut up coffee filter absolutely free. So act now. Why?
If you want to be able to support not just my channel, but any reviewer, then when you make a purchase, be sure to tell that retailer where you heard about it. Thanks for watching.